You have questions, we have answers. This is Jane Muller.
And this is Ken Muller. Welcome to our show, all about real estate with Ken and Jane. Today, Jane, we are going to discuss the question of whether you should sell or rent your home when the time comes for you that you decide that you have to leave. So that's the age-old question. It's analogous to stock. Sometimes with the stock, you want to know, should I hold it or should I sell it, right? And
I often get that question from the clients.
Right. A lot of times, a lot of sellers or potential sellers ask, is it better? Should I rent it? I'm moving out of state. And it really, the answer to it, there's not one universal answer, yes or no. It really depends. It depends on a lot of variables. First off, you have to be in the financial position to be able to do that. Some sellers may need the proceeds from the sale in order to purchase their next home or wherever they're relocating to. So that would answer the question. They have no choice but to sell because they need the cash. They're moving to out of state. They need the $300,000 or $400,000 in proceeds they're netting from the sale to take with them and go on to their next journey. Yeah. But if you're in the position where you don't need the proceeds from the sale, you may want to consider renting as opposed to selling. And we're gonna cover some of the tips for helping you to make that decision. Some of the pros and cons of each area.
You know, sometimes, right, Ken, a lot of homeowners, they pondering, should I sell? Should I rent? When do I sell? You know, almost like you have a luxury, have the option. Actually, sometimes maybe no option, right? Just like, if you have to sell, the answer, as you said, is very simple. If you want to move and you have to sell. I had that happen to me many, many years ago. There was a very good friend and his parents want to sell their home and they want to move to a ranch because they're getting older. They prefer ranch. Plus, they are pastors in a very large church. Sometimes they do have people come to their home to meetings, things like that. And so at that time, they've been thinking about selling for many years. Why not? Because every time they had 4 or 5 agents represent them before me. The time is when they got offered, they always stopped and thinking, how about if I don't find anything? So, in that case, what am I going to do? That was, that was not even the COVID time. It was a long, long time ago, over 10 years ago, 10, 11, 12 years ago. So I put a question in front of them. Do you really need to move? They say, yes.
And what's the reason?
Why? Because they said that they need they're getting older. They want one level. They had a Cape Cod, and also they want a larger floor plan so they can accommodate, the guest there, visitor there, and also their son just is finished high school. So to them, the township is which township is not so important anymore, but they rather have the ranch and the space in the yard and so on and so forth. So I said to them, if you really want to move, you say to yourself, that's it. I've been waiting so many years. I have to move now. I have to move. And I don't have fun to buy without selling these. So the only way for me to move is to take leap of faith and put a house on the market. How do we know? I said, pray. You're a pastor. You know better than me. Mm-hmm. Pray. Sure. So they did. At the end, we did put our house on the market very quickly. We got an offer. And at that time, I suggested maybe you have to think to rent period of time because we may not able to get a perfect home straight away. But very lucky, to God mercy, we found something really the vacant. The deal just fell through. The other deal, whatever reason. So just for us, just perfect. At the end, we sold and we stayed in that house for a few days. The buyer allowed us to stay, which is very kind of them. And then use occupancy, and then we moved in within a week to the new location. So in that case, you have to sell because there's no option. If you're thinking many years, that means you're not ready to move yet. To the point, just like Tony Robbins said, if you say to yourself, I can't stand it anymore, I have to make a move, I have to do something. So obviously that time maybe is a good time for you to to thinking about selling.
Right.
In that.
And there should be no hesitation if they're concerned about finding a suitable relocation place or a home they're going to be happy with, then they can always protect themselves contractually by putting a clause in the contract that's subject to the seller's relocation. So that way that should not be the deterrent for any seller thinking, gee, I don't want to sell because I may not have anywhere suitable to relocate to where they can protect themselves. So
I agree with you, Ken. Legally, you can do that. I saw in the past many sellers in the last 3 years when it's a good market, they did that. But I would say they definitely affect them to get more quality buyers. And we had, our past client, remember, they made offer in one home. The seller put on that, the subject to purchase, and they were waiting. 9 months later, the interest went so high. So at the end, the buyer has to cancel the contract because they can't lock in the rate. They were buying something like a $700,000 house, but that time the interest rate was only 4.25. But they waited because the seller couldn't find a home. Finally, the seller found a home, but in the interim, the interest rate is a 6.5. So at the end, the couple bought something like a mid-4, right? Because they figured they can't afford that grand home they have. They want to have an interim home. Now they changed the strategy because that $700,000 house was their dream home. If they had that, they would stay there. But because the rate go up so much, they no longer can afford that. So, but they don't want, But at the end, they chose to buy a townhouse in interim and to move there until they found or when the rate come down, they can able to buy their dream home next time. So what you said, legally, I mean, attorney from the legal perspective, yes, definitely.
Yes, but from the practical standpoint, it could jeopardize your deal, your chances of closing with any buyer because of the market conditions changing. So
and also the price too, because if the seller have such uncertainty, it's very different, Ken, if you build a new home. That's I understand. That may not affect the seller that much. Say you said my new home will be built ready by November per se, right? But legally you can put in there, worst come to worst, right? We may delay it by the end of the year. You have to put the end date. So if the buyer agree. So most of the case they would, because a lot of buyer had a rent, month to month. So most case, okay. But if you say...
Or worst comes to worst, they can do a use and occupancy, in which case if the seller says, hey, I still need more time, the buyer can agree. Usually the lenders will allow up to 60 days where they can close title. The seller can stay in the house subsequent to the closing of title. That's called a U&O, use and occupancy. And they have up to 60 days before they have to move out. And then it's treated as not as a landlord-tenant, but is subject to a use and occupancy agreement where there's a security deposit held from the closing until the seller vacates, and then everything the seller the buyer legally owns the property, but the seller is still occupying it.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. But if you say I just want to sell my house subject to I found nice home, like the example I gave earlier, that's open.
That's too
open book. Yeah, so a lot of buyer wouldn't want to do that, especially in today's market. The rate go up. So I mean, they may not want to lock themselves. Plus, when they all have children, they all have most of them. I shouldn't say all. Some of them have children need to register school. There's a lot of factors in decision making. So if you have to sell in order to buy, and you're absolutely sure you want to move and put on the market, maybe is the only option we have, unfortunately, here.
Right. And it also depends on the market conditions. Certainly now we're in a seller's market, even though the interest rates have crept up because the inventory is so low. So you have to evaluate at the time you're ready to sell, look at your market conditions. And if the market is high and you're not really keen on holding onto your home as an asset, as a long-term asset and renting it, you may consider selling it when the market is high because you have you're going to have a quicker sale. You're going to have probably most likely a smoother transaction because there's more competition. So with the home inspection and things, the buyers can't be as picky because they know that in this market, it's so competitive. Despite the high interest rates, there's still multiple bids going on in Central Jersey. So with all that in mind, the buyers cannot be ultra picky when it comes to things like the home inspection and nitpick everything. Whereas if you take a lower market like we had back in 2011, there it was a buyer's market. The prices were down, they were depressed. So when the home inspection came up, there were things that were certain buyers' wish list things that got resolved because the seller had no choice. Because in a buyer's market, the buyers have the control and they can demand certain things. Like, for example, we had one case, or you had one particular case where a rusty chimney cap was an issue where the seller could say it's cosmetic, the buyer could say no, it's structural. So the resolution is it all depends on which market you're in. If you're in the seller's market, most likely the buyer will have to absorb it and then deal with it, post closing. Whereas in a buyer's market, the buyer can most likely successfully demand that be painted to remove the rust.
Or even replace it, even though it doesn't need
right.
to. Ken, I agree with you 200%, right? But think about it. Put yourself into buyer position, right? If you're a buyer, if you could buy this house today with $500,000 per se, the market is going down, tomorrow you could get cheaper. And so, therefore, the motivation is not there for the buyer, right? I mean, of course, they got more demanding because they want to get whatever they wanted to compensate the future, the price drop. For example, in 2009, 2010, a lot of sellers still remember the neighbor. I mean, they always tell you recent, no, it's at least 2 years. Like 2007, they sold 2 years ago, sold X amount. So they still want that. But in 2009, 10, and 10 is no longer, that market. So they got much less. And then some sellers said, I'm not in a rush, I'm going to wait. And the 11, 12, even worse. Most of my clients, once again, everybody's different. It's not only the number. Some of them worry a lot. They want a smooth transaction. When the market in the down market, buyer, as you said, right, more demanding. For example, in 2011, I had a contract. The buyer was really, in my opinion, was wrong. I mean, even though I represent buyer, right, they did a home inspection. They want a brand new HVAC. They're still working, 30 years old, but still working. But my buyer said, unless I get it, and I'm going to kill the deal. I really advise them when we're before put offer in. I said, you put offer, 10, 20,000 lower. I said, the HVAC at that time may cost you $8,000 to change it, right? So I advise them. They say, yes, we made offer. Take consideration of that future replacement. But even though during a home inspection, they still demand it. And I represent the buyer. Obviously, I want the best for them. I couldn't say anything, but at the end, the seller say no, and the buyer canceled.
Right, and despite the attorney language, which might address that, there's always a way. If the buyer really doesn't want to go ahead with the deal, there's not much that the seller is going to want to do to hold them to it, unless it's egregious. So they'll likely let them go because otherwise they're going to waste more time. So most oftentimes the buyer can find a way to get out of the deal in the home inspection if they really want to. They could be very demanding. And even if the seller, even if the contractual language says no, it says as long as it's in working condition, and then you could, you have to accept it. But then you could get into the debate about is it improper working condition, and then they bring
perfect working condition, working condition,
right? So you can. So that's what I'm saying. They usually most of the time the seller and the seller attorney will just let that buyer walk away because they know they're not going to be able to hold them to it, and it's not worth the time and effort to fight them anymore, and they'll just want to cut their losses and move on, which is what happened in your client's case.
Yes.
The buyer just decided to walk because they.
I didn't know contract was canceled, and then they reinstated, gave us what we wanted.
Oh, okay. Well, there.
Because the market's still going down point in 2011. Yes.
All right. Sounds good. Why don't we take a short break? We'll be right back after these messages. Okay, welcome back to our show. We're continuing to discuss the advantages of selling versus renting your home. And let's continue talking about the selling considerations. If you decide, if you're a seller in the situation where in a few years you're going to have to move out of state, you may want to consider selling your home now, parking yourself somewhere in a rental and capturing the market because the market is still high, relatively high. We're talking at least for Central Jersey. So that's where it comes into the timing. It all depends on your timing and your long-term plans. Because in that situation, if you're going to move out of state to Florida, to North Carolina, area. I mean, yes, you could still rent. You could hire, somebody, a property management company if you really want to hold on to the house as a long-term asset. But normally, if you're going to move out of state, it might end up, given the market is high, it might be best to just capitalize, take the proceeds, use the proceeds, to pay off any other debts you have, or just put towards your new purchase, and let go of the house. Park yourself somewhere in a rental, and until you find your new home, or until you're ready to relocate, out of state, which is what oftentimes some of our clients have done.
Yes.
So that's something to consider with the selling. And also another advantage of selling is you avoid the responsibilities of a landlord, because with a home, especially, or whether it be a townhome, a single-family home, even a condominium, there's always responsibilities. The tenants are there. Even though the lease may address, there's always exterior maintenance. You have to, things happen, branches and trees fall down. The tenant calls you and says things aren't working. The plumbing, there's a backup. So you have to always, appliances, the washer, the dryer stop working. So regardless of what your lease says, with repairs, usually the landlord has some responsibility for repairs. It's not entirely upon the tenant. The tenant may have a limited responsibility to do, pay the first, be responsible for maybe $100 or $200, or if they certainly if they're negligent or reckless, then the repair costs fall on the tenant. But the landlord, as a home, any house, any townhouse requires continual maintenance and upkeep, and so if you're in the mindset that, hey, I'm the seller, I want to just let go of my home. It served its purpose. I don't want to be bothered long term. I don't want the tenants calling me, every month. I don't want to have to manage this property. I just want to let it go, take the cash and the money and use it somewhere else where I'm going to. I'm out of state, which is another consideration of why you might want to consider selling as opposed to renting.
I always tell my investor client, this is, you take on a part-time job, right? The tenant is your client too. So you have to treat them with respect, work together, so have a very good relationship. But thank God our clients are pretty good, so it's not as bad. But you do get a phone call 10 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning if the heat stop in winter. So, it definitely happens. But how often it happens is if you take care of your property, may not happen that much. So the key is to prevent happening, to invest. That you said, some owner don't want to be bothered, so best to sell. Otherwise, I would highly recommend to invest something to upgrade your windows, upgrade your HVAC, upgrade certain things, and maybe ask the work out with the tenant to buy the worry-free warranty. So if the things happen, the things can be taken care of quickly. So
right.
That's really
certainly.
Yeah, I think another very good benefit I often discuss with the clients, try to decide the sell versus rental, is the tax implication. Mm-hmm. That's a big, big topic. So the tax, if you live in a house last 2 years, regardless how long some of my clients live there all their life, 30, 40 years, but regardless, the minimum 2 years of the last 5 years, the gain can be, subject to,
I think, let me just quantify it. I think, first of all, this is not considered tax advice. You should always check with your tax accountant. We're only giving you general knowledge.
Yes.
But the rule for capital gains is that if you lived in your home 2 of the last 5 years, and it's your principal residence, as we understand the IRS laws right now, that if you sell it, if you're a married couple and you sell the home, up to $500,000 in gain is tax free. If you're single and selling the home, the gain limitation is up to $250,000 of gain is tax free. Again, please check with your accountant. There's a lot of variables. It has to be your principal residence. You cannot have claimed this exemption within the last 2 years. And you have to have lived in the home for 2 of the last 5 years. So certainly, if this was your only home, married couple, you lived in the home for 30 years, you bought the house for $250,000, you're selling it for $800,000, then in that example, the gain would be actually, no, that would be a little bit over
Yeah,
500,000.
Ken, Ken, first of all, if you bought 40 years ago, you may only pay the 50,000.
Right.
That's lead to another, question is, whether you keep, right? In the long term, the price does go up for the real estate. But whether it's you want to cash in to take advantage of the tax benefit, so it is, it's up to you. It depends how much you purchase, how much you invest during these years to upgrade the home if you have a receipt. And once again, we're not here to give legal advice or the accounting advice. You have to seek the right advice from the licensed professional, the CPA, as well as your attorney. But that's definitely a good benefit to the owner if you want to sell now and to keep the proceed. Yeah.
Right. The example I meant to say is if you bought it, let's say for $250,000, let's say
you
20
said
years,
800 is still,
and then you sell it for 700.
Yeah.
So there, in that case, the gain, assuming your basis is legitimately 250,000, the gain would be 450,000 if you're a married couple. That 450,000 filing jointly, that 450,000 in gain would be tax free if you qualify for everything under this tax exempt rule. So that's
and then the other 50,000, maybe you had a receipt to put during the 30 years. I'm sure you probably put a roof on, you probably put a new HVAC, you probably change the windows. That's a part of the deduction as well. But which is
we're getting right, which is
we're
important.
We're not here to give
but one important thing is if you're a homeowner, you should always keep receipts for all the major repairs, for windows, for roofs, because that all contributes to your increasing your basis. So you step up your basis, then your gain is reduced. So that way, if you for some reason fall above, if you go higher than the $500,000 capital gain, that's a way to get you back into that lower your gain because you're increasing your basis.
Sure, absolutely.
So that's very, very important.
Yep. Absolutely. Let's continue. Otherwise, we'll run out of time again.
So let's talk about some of the advantages of renting now. We covered the rental. One advantage is real estate usually appreciates over time. So by holding on to a property over time, the likelihood is if you hold it for 10, 20 years that it's going to appreciate in value. And also you're going to have a cash flow coming in from the rental income. You're going to have a steady cash flow, which might be preferable for some people. They may not need to sell, and they may want to hold it and hold it as a long-term investment. It comes down to personal preference. They might be moving locally. They might have contractors, and they might be handy themselves, and have no problem self-managing the property and have the time and
or you can hire a management company.
Or you hire a management company to do it, and they take care of it, and they usually charge a percentage of the rent, but they can take care of everything from managing the repairs, collecting the rent for you, and the whole 9 yards. So. So that's something. And then
and also, Ken, you just mentioned, right, this is like an investment. When I was in the school, they said the number one thing is diversify, right? If you have your home resident, if you have some money in the stock, in the bond, in whatever the form, right? Sometimes real estate is a part of it. So obviously, we see in the past 3 years, the real estate had helped a lot with protect yourself from the inflation, because when inflation is high, your rent go up as a result. So if you want, you can, if this is I always recommend if it's a small home or townhouse and condo, maybe that's suitable for investment property. If it's a big house, so the return, the maintenance, everything may not worth it. So it's a case by case.
Right. And we spoke about the tax benefits of selling your home, where there also are tax benefits to renting your home, namely the mortgage interest. If you still carry a mortgage on the property, the interest is tax deductible. The property taxes are tax deductible, and the operating expenses are on the rental property. So you can offset your rental income can be offset by repair costs and by these other expenses. And also if you belong to an association, the association maintenance fees are all tax deductible as well.
Yeah, but think about it, Ken, right? If you have a property like a townhouse or a condo, you outgrow it, you bought a bigger family, regardless in state, out of states, right? You buy another home. So if you can afford, to buy without selling, and you can rent this out, And maybe after 20, 30 years, when you're retired, the house is paid off. So that's your additional cash income, right?
Right. So you're building, right. So that's right. If you have a mortgage on it, you're building it because you're using the rental income to help you pay the mortgage off, which will help you have own a bigger piece of the real estate transaction. Eventually, like you said, in 20, 30 years, the goal would be that you own it outright. And then in that time of 20 to 30 years, if they play your cards right, the property has appreciated significantly. So
will help you with a monthly cash flow too.
Right.
So
you're building. So the advantage of being a landlord is you're building long-term wealth and also have a steady monthly cash flow, assuming you've got the place rented and you have good long-term tenants and you have it managed. So the key is, to invest in looking at getting your lease tidied up so you cover the loose ends and you have your game plan in place for the repairs, for getting your contractors lined up or whomever, or a property management company if you need that, so that you're in good shape, so you're not surprised unexpectedly with calls in the middle of the night about the heat not working or other.
Yeah, if you have questions, please welcome to call us. And we help a lot of our clients with rental property in Central Jersey. So if you need our help, let us know. And if you try to decide what to do, I would highly recommend you to call your local real estate expert like ourselves, and you can speak to your accountant and attorney to decide, because this is not general answer for everybody. It really depends on your own circumstances. What more important to you? At the end of the day, you can hire all the professionals, but we all have to do what you try to achieve, right? By talking to those professionals may clear your own mind at the same time, so to make the informative decision. So a lot of things, as long as you think about it, you make informed decision, that's pretty much you're on the right track.
Absolutely. All right, Jane. Very good. We're out of time. Hope everyone enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.